Folks, happy Friday and welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name's Jason Roberts and I'm here with my partner in crime,
Todd Peterson. Good to have you back, and thanks for joining us at 11:30 here, taking care of some business at home, but good to have you with us today.
Yeah, sorry we're a little late, folks. We had life sometimes you got life to take care of. But everything's good. Today is going to be a barn burner of an episode. And we're going to be talking birth control. We'll be talking about the A word. We'll see how Facebook likes that. We're going to talk about the pills and big pharma. But yeah, so it's going to be an awful exciting episode. Before I get into it, though, one ask of everybody. Here at Freedom from the Press, we believe in having honest conversations, realize it's not right versus left, realize it's us versus them. So we're going to encourage you to like, comment, and share, especially share. And we like to tell people share with somebody that maybe you don't politically agree with, somebody with a little different views than you. And for us, we're two dudes from Minnesota who decided, let's do a podcast and talk about stuff. And suppression is real and just real story. You'll see on our bottom scroll, we shout out our website, freedomfromthepress.news or theamericantribune.news, sorry, and www.theamericantribune.news. So funny story. This week, Facebook flagged that URL. And if you go on that website, we break down Epstein stuff. We break down eugenics, World Economic Forum. But Facebook magically, the algorithm said, we don't like that website, so we can't even share it in the comments on some of these platforms. But so do us a favor, folks. Make sure you like, comment, and share, and give us a follow if you like what we do. But with that, Todd, why don't we start this week's episode out? Tell them the story how this week's episode came about.
All right, we're going to get real with y'all here. And like Jason mentioned, there's an article up that I wrote this week on AmericanTribune.news, and it relates to a vasectomy that I just got a couple weeks ago. And then happy to report the healing is well underway here. If anyone's gone through that, there are a couple days where you're just worried about how everything looks and feels. But we're on the mend here. But what really prompted the article this week was a comment made to me by my doctor, both in the consult and then later, right after the procedure was finished as well. And it was one, as I described in the Substack article, it was jubilant. He was thrilled for me that I would, quote, no longer be able to have kids. And now, Jason, I know the immediate reaction, and my wife's reaction too when she read the piece was like, well, wasn't that what we wanted? Don't you want that procedure to be successful? And absolutely. I get into the Substack. You don't really get into my personal philosophy about why I did that. I think it's pretty obvious why we did that here. But the takeaway and the focus of the piece really is about that attitude and mindset. And I make the connection. If I was in there for hip surgery, I would want my doctor to be excited. Like, congratulations, you're going to be able to walk again without pain. When it comes to birth control and really the focus of our conversation, devaluation of human life, when it comes to a vasectomy, I admit that I was taken aback by that. Yes, I wanted the procedure to work well so that my wife and I moving forward wouldn't necessarily be worried about that. Our family size is good where it's at here. But there's also, I don't know how to phrase this, Jason, other than say, there's a certain loss to not being able to have kids anymore. I'm at peace with that decision here. But in the larger scope of things, the attitude towards not being able to have a larger family, or for a man not to be able to get a woman pregnant. And as we get into the conversation about the pill and the A word, about a woman not being able to get pregnant or carrying that pregnancy through to term, this gets into a much deeper conversation about where are we at as a society, and especially our medical community, that views that as just a simple procedure without taking a step back and saying, there are really big issues at play here when it comes to human life and what do we value in society. The takeaway from the doctor's office was not one of valuing human life. And so that's what prompted me to write the Substack article. Yep, I got in there because personal decisions. But at the same time everything that was mentioned to me in the doctor's office, as we explored the article, we get into all of the things there you can see on our agenda. It goes much deeper. There's a lot of undercurrents in society that clearly we do not value human life the same way we did before just a couple decades ago. And there's some real concerns about what that means moving forward.
Yeah, and it was funny when Todd was talking, you get through the, hey, how to go, how's your healing and whatnot. And then he said, I got to say, I'm talking to my doctor and he's excited. He's some young dude who's excited I won't be able to have any more kids. And then you think about how that extrapolates into society and just how we valued life and purpose. And it's funny, just as we were kicking around the conversation, we're like, this would be a great podcast. Hopefully people can resonate with it and go, this makes some sense. And as we talk about birth control, I think the first logical place for us to land is, well, before we get into the pill, because that's the first logical place, understand as human beings, our existence for hundreds and thousands of years has been, how do I ensure we procreate, and how do I take care of my young? How do I leave my tribe in better shape so that my kids and my grandkids and their grandkids can all have it better than I did? And that was like a foundational thing way back from when we were cavemen. We wanted to procreate, we wanted to reproduce, we wanted to advance things. And if you look at what the left's doing, destroying society, a huge part of that is because they're not envisioning, what about my kids, my grandkids, or their grandkids? They're looking at, what do I need to do today? How do I manage my id today? And it's such a destructive way for us to run society. Todd, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you can talk to so many people of my age or slightly younger there. How they view children is that it's, number one, a burden. Like, how is my life going to change if I have a kid? And then what do I have to sacrifice to raise kids? And those are legitimate questions. Like, make no mistake, Jason, you and I are both parents. We've made sacrifices for our children. I would argue once you get in that position, though, those are great sacrifices, and you hardly even think of it that way. Like, would I love to go golfing more, traveling more, spend more time doing podcasts every day? Sure. But at the end of the day, there is nothing more fulfilling and rewarding than raising a child and just watching them progress on a daily basis. And they hit those milestones. And I know every parent gets worked up about, like, oh, did my kid walk at the same time that your kid walked? Whenever it happens, whenever those things happen, it's beautiful. So I no longer really view child raising as a burden or a sacrifice. These are things that I want to do, and it enriches your life. But so many people nowadays view a child as something that's just going to get in the way of what they want to do to find immediate pleasure, that immediate gratification. And so, like you said, there's long-term consequences of how we view life. And again, as we get into the discussion here, it all centers around devaluing human life. There's no longer this thought of others. It's really about, what can I do for myself right now?
Yeah, and I mean, that's such a powerful thought to think about. If you had to bucket society's ills, I think one undercurrent that underpins everything is, as a society, we've moved into a spot where it's just, what about me? What can I do to make my life better today? And we've completely disconnected, and it gets more and more disconnected with every younger generation. We talk about national debt, and that national debt's going to have an impact on my life, but I'm almost 50. Like, what do I got, 20, 30 years left? But these young kids in their 20s and 30s that aren't worried about debt or interest rates or that kind of thing, that's going to impact them much longer than it will me. I mean, my kids and my stepkids, like, they're the ones who are inheriting this. And we've lost that function of a society where I need to be focused on, what can I do to be a good person and raise and create that next generation and teach them the right things. And it's funny, it's not always how it starts, but it's kind of how we get there. And the first topic we're going to talk about is the pill. And it was funny, as Todd and I were talking before the show, like, the pill is really destructive on American society, in my opinion. And I think we'll start going through some of the numbers of the pill and how it impacts things on a global scale that I don't think people really connect.
Yeah, and Jason, before we do, I wasn't going to bring this up, but it kind of prompted a thought as you were talking about the financial burden that future generations face. Another thing that I hear from younger people right now, and friends of mine included, are that we're going to wait to have kids until we're in a financially stable position. So I want to pay off my student loans, or I want to pay off my mortgage, or I want to buy a house first. The sad reality is, like, it's going to be a different economic environment out there. And if you're waiting to have just the right amount of money, or you're waiting just to have that perfect lifestyle set up, like, it's never going to happen. Like, if you're waiting for there never to be any more problems and now I'm ready to have kids, I got news for you. Like, life's always going to throw a curveball. And so that's just one more angle that young people are taking nowadays. And perhaps this narrative is foisted upon them in some part as well. But you need to wait till you're ready to have kids. Well, I was an older dad. Let me tell you, I was still not ready to have kids. You just make it up as you go along for a good
Right.
while. But there's never a perfect time, but you got to make it work and prioritize it.
Yeah, you just fake it till you make it. And if you're waiting for the exact right time, to start like, and it's funny because if you think back, it wasn't that long ago. Our parents or grandparents, their goal was, how do I get out into the real world? How do I start earning a living so I can start my family and building my future generation? And now that's been flipped on its head, where it's, how do I get out in the real world and just keep feeding my id with whatever, whatever debauchery that's the pleasure of the day.
All right.
But
And Jason, let me segue that into the pill then. So you talk about getting into the workforce. No one has been more harmed by that than women under feminism. The guys that you don't want to be controlled by a man or a slave in your kitchen. And we're watching so many young women go on the pill, go into the workforce, and be absolutely miserable working a corporate 9 to 5 job that's just not fulfilling for women, especially. Make no mistake, I used to work in a corporate office. I hated it. I worked in education. I mean, I loved what I did, but at the same time, like, I'm giving back to someone else other than my own family. So helping raise other kids, in a sense, in the public school system didn't let me raise my own kids. And so we're always going out for something else, thinking that's where we're going to find meaning, when really we just have to look inside, our own lives and our own personal families too. But let's get into the pill a little bit, because that is a hot button issue here.
mind-boggling.
Where do you want to begin with this, Jason? We got a couple different slides we can pull up.
Well, let's just kind of start at the beginning.
And then we got, I'm reading Paul's comment here. So first and foremost, the pill came about in the 1960s. Jason, we're going to get into the cultural degradation as well that brought about. I'm just going to fast forward here to today, though. What we see the pill getting used for nowadays is not just birth control. It is explicitly marketed as a lifestyle drug, because big pharma sees 50% of the American population, and then we have global figures as well. All of these women, any woman, is a potential customer for big pharma. And once you get on the pill, they see you as a potential lifelong customer. And so from economics alone, this is a huge problem. We always talk about, like, who benefits. Well, who does benefit when you introduce the pill to society? Is it the individual young woman who can now have unfettered sex to the extent that she wants without any consequences? Or is it big pharma who is raking in billions of dollars by making sure that their product gets in the hands of every single potential consumer?
Well, and it's interesting if you break that down. So in the 60s, it was started with, how do we give women control of their sexual reproduction so they're not reliant on the man to do it? And then it'll free you up to be free. And I gotta say, men and women are hardwired to do certain things. Like Todd and I, as men, are hardwired to go out and provide for our family. That's the end of it. Like that's what we're hardwired to do. Meanwhile, our wives are hardwired to take care of the family. I'm the hunter and gatherer. She is the build the home. That's just how men and women are wired. And going counter against that wiring on large scales just has negative consequences. But back to the pill. So if you think of it from Big Pharma's perspective, they start marketing these pills to girls at young ages. I mean, even right when they start showing symptoms of having menstrual cycles. Now, the way the pill works is it stimulates your brain and you release hormones, and those hormones control your ovulation cycle. Now, if you step back and say, okay, one, we have removed women's purpose, because their purpose used to be, how do I learn to be a homemaker and how do I get ready to find a husband and make kids? So that was kind of their ingrained purpose. And then you give them a medication that messes with their hormones and how their brain functions. Like, there's no way that you can stimulate the producing those hormones without having other effects. And then for Big Pharma, if they get you as a young girl hooked on a pill at 13, 14 years old, you're going to take that pill for the next 30, 40 years. And think of how many thousands of dollars that brings into them. And it's kind of like the transgender stuff that we've talked about. If you get a young kid converted, like, you just got a lifetime customer. And what kind of business model wouldn't want a lifetime customer?
Yeah, it's a great model. And Jason, I'll share a little bit more of my story here. So the reason that I got a vasectomy is because my wife, when she got off birth control so we could start having our family, she refused to go back on. She said, I feel so much better. I feel so much more in sync. Like, I quote a Candace Owens piece in my Substack as well, that at a spiritual level, you're just off when you're on the pill, because, like you said, it disrupts your basic hormonal functions. So it is not natural. what the pill does to your body, in the sense that, like, your body was designed, I would argue, almost perfectly, and now we're putting some synthetic into that to make it not function the same way. And there's going to be deleterious consequences down the line from that. And so let's just segue into this piece. We can go back to the economics a little bit more if we want to, but talking about how women on birth control are suffering from a massive influx of mental health issues. And I know mental health, it's kind of an umbrella term. It's not exactly nailed down on what that means. It's often subjective because there's really no hard and fast criteria. But I'll take women at their word in this case, that they're not feeling natural or right anymore. And so they're reporting increased mental health, anxiety. I'm going to pop over here, Jason, and let you hop back in here. But women are twice as likely as men to develop an anxiety disorder as they get older. Now, is this something, again, we're not bashing on women in any sense here. We both have wives. I have 2 daughters. I am the last person that's going to knock on women here. But worth asking the question, is this something that's natural? Because I don't remember hearing about this 100 years ago. Or is this something related to getting on hormones or hormone disruptors?
Well, and it's interesting too, just to share a personal story. So my wife and I were both diabetics, and we were prescribed Ozempic a while ago, a year and a half ago. And what Ozempic does is you shoot yourself with the medication, and it stays with you for a week, and it stimulates your hypothalamus. So when you start eating, your hypothalamus starts secreting chemicals that go out in your body and say, "Oh, yeah, you've eaten enough," and it makes you feel full and not want to eat. And it's interesting because it works really effectively. I mean, if you're looking for a weight loss thing or whatnot, like, God love you, Ozempic's great for it. But it's interesting because both my wife and I, and more so with her, she was starting to have anxiety problems, and I was starting to have some of that too. And it's like you draw the connection. You go, now wait a second. So this thing's stimulating my my hypothalamus, which secretes hormones that control mood and appetite and sexual function and everything else. And you think it's only going to do that. You think it's just going to do that one impact, and it's not going to have unintended consequences. And that's the same thing with the pill. You start messing with people's brains, the hormones it's secreting, and how it's going to impact that girl's life for the rest of her life. And then you wonder, why do we have a mental health problem? So first you remove the purpose, which, let's face it, men and women, like, our purpose is to have and raise children. Like, that is where we find fulfillment. That, and your family and your faith, like, those are kind of foundational principles that if those are right, the rest of your life's pretty good. You figure the rest of it out. We've taken that family unit away, and then we've introduced all these chemicals that are going to make people think and feel a certain way. And then we're shocked that women that women feel lack of purpose. And I got to say, Todd did a great job with his Substack article. You can read it at www.theamericantribune.news. And Candace Owen had a long string on it that he quoted from there, where it was like, at 13 years old, she's in the doctor's office. So like, hey, let's get you on the pill. And she's like, well, I'm not going to have sex. Like, why would I need the pill? And then it's, oh, you got acne. Hey, you know what would work with that? The pill. Hey, you got this. You know what? You know what would help with your migraines? The pill. And she's like, how come every time I turn around, these guys are trying to throw me on birth control? It's like the craziest thing ever.
Well, I'll tell you why, Jason. Take a look at this chart right here. And for those just listening on audio, we have a chart right now of just the North American market here in terms of contraception pill size of the market here. So this goes back from 2015 and then projecting out to 2026. They're expecting a more than doubling in billions of dollars in terms of how much money they expect to generate from just the pill alone. So we're looking upwards of $10 billion in North America. Worldwide, the figure is expected to rise from right now $13 billion to $25 billion, so almost a doubling globally as well. There is a massive financial motive for them to get this pill in the hands of as many young girls as possible.
Say that number again, Todd. How much money in America is spent on the pill?
We're hitting $10 billion, Jason.
So, folks, think of that, and think of how much business, like, companies do, like Target or Walmart or that kind of thing. Just the birth control pill, that there's no marketing needed for, because the doctors are throwing kids on it as soon as they can. There's not really a lot of research and development. There's no cost. $10 billion to these pharmaceutical companies. And then you go to yourself, Well, why is everybody pushing the pill? Well, you know why they're pushing the pill. It's a simple solution for the doctors. In a lot of cases, they're getting kickbacks on the back end. And these pharmaceutical companies, they're just printing $100 bills. $10 billion. It's insane.
And Jason, we referenced the mental health side effects of that. Now, we have a really smart audience out there. Jason, I wasn't able to find any conclusive study. Have they ever researched with, the random control trial, double blind? Have they ever done a study on what are the side effects vis-a-vis mental health and taking the pill? Do you know of anything? Does our audience know of anything?
I have not seen anything on the effects of that. It's funny if you bring up the V word, vaccine, like same thing. They don't do double blind studies to find out what the long-term ramifications are.
Yeah, and that would definitely be detrimental because, look, you and I have a lot of conjecture here, but it seems like there's a lot of evidence, certainly anecdotal, very subjective, but there seems to be growing evidence that there is a relationship. But what that would do then to generations of women that have been on the pill their entire life, only to discover, like, oops, this actually led to my current anxiety disorder.
Well, right. And I mean, if you look, when the chart of anxiety goes like this, and then the chart of taking the pill goes like this, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say there's probably some relation between the two things, And Paul Reese has a great call out. Shout out to Paul and our friends over at Split Rock Coffee. They sell the pills to fix when in fact it's nutritional issues. Yeah, I tell you what, if you've ever had a daughter that you've taken into the doctor, like Candace Owens said, they're going to throw them on the pill for every answer to every problem that we have.
Yeah, and Paul, thanks for the comment there. I mean, this goes back to so much about medicine right now, though. If you go into the doctor for anything, what's their first inclination? It's to prescribe something to you. When in fact, and I'm not a doctor here, this is not medical advice whatsoever, but if you sleep well, eat right, find something fulfilling in your life, I think you're going to set yourself up for a lot of good work there. Certainly, there are cases where we have modern techniques and surgery that can't be replicated through diet. We have pills for people that are in extreme situations, but for a lot of that lifestyle stuff, acne, get off sugar, get off carbohydrates, just go on meat and vegetables for a little bit. I think you're going to be okay.
Right. Well, and it's funny, and I'll challenge the audience. Like, tell me if I'm wrong. Every time you go to the doctor, they try to get you on another pill, or they're increasing your dosage, or they're playing with your medication, or let's with this one for that one, that sort of thing. And, it's funny, as a diabetic, I take insulin, but, your doctor, especially if you don't push back, they're throwing 20 different pills at you. And like I remember in my 30s, I had the old man pill bottle where I'm like, oh my God, how am I on all this stuff? And at no point do they say, hey, you know what? Maybe stop eating garbage. Maybe eat some meat and cheese, maybe a little fruit, have a vegetable every now and then. No. It's like, hey, here's your magic pill. Like, let me send. And now it's your mail order pharmacy. So you don't even have to go anywhere. It's just like, here's your thing. It'll show up at your house in a week.
Yeah, it's pretty bonkers stuff here, Jason. I do want to go back to, I don't know if there's anything that you want to bookend on the pill here. I want to go back to vasectomies before we hit our first break here. And exciting news, folks. We have some exciting commercials here. We got some great sponsors joining the show here. So we're excited to roll out some MyPillow and some Split Rock coffee for you in just a little bit here. If I can go back to vasectomies, though, I want to come back to this idea of the devaluation of human life. If you're watching with us, take a look at that middle third paragraph right there, where in the last 10 years, the greatest increases in people getting vasectomies were men with no children. They saw a 61% increase in the absolute number of them getting vasectomies. And then young men, that went up 37% when they're the ages of 18 to 24. So you're looking at two huge demographics of people that do not have children, and they are preempting an entire life of fatherhood. Based on, again, kind of what you and I said earlier, Jason, this idea that kids are just going to get in the way of doing what I want to do right now.
Yeah, and it's remarkable. We're both dads. Can you name anything in life that gave you more fulfillment than being a dad? Maybe being a husband, other than that?
And Jason, I was up 5 times last night with my oldest. I have a 3-year-old that just did not want to go to sleep. And so we're up a good chunk of the night. And you're miserable in the moment, but it's kind of like, what else would I rather be doing? Like, she's going to grow up in 20 years and look back and see, like, my dad was there for me. And when I'm older and looking back on that too, it's going to be like, I'm going to miss that. Right now, I wish I was more rested, but give it enough time. I'm going to miss those nights where I'm up all night with her, comforting, soothing, just being there for her.
Yeah, and it's remarkable too, Todd. Are we going to talk about how vasectomies got started?
Oh, we should probably get into that a little bit here.
Good.
And this will kind of segue us into our commercial break and then the A word on the other side. So, folks, hang on to this information here because it's going to tie back into what we cover on the other side of our commercial break here. Interesting. I learned this as I did a lot of research heading into my procedure. And so I was not going in blind. I had read everything, still decided to go through with it. Was very surprised to learn, though. But, we shouldn't be surprised because, after all, a lot of these things start off with nefarious purposes. But vasectomies got their start around 100 years ago, 120 years ago, and they were performed on criminals, on repeat offenders of a certain variety as a way to prevent the repeat offenses, but also, and again, this is going to tie into our A-word conversation, this was to prevent undesirables from procreating.
Think of that. And when we talk about the A word, you'll find that the A word started out with much the same eugenics property. So if you go back in history too, vasectomies or castrations, they were a form of punishment, and they were usually applied to people who did really, really bad things or things of a sexual nature. And it's interesting how it started out in common use, where essentially criminals or undesirable populations, they would encourage them to get vasectomies, and then they would sell it under the benefit of, oh, it's going to be so much easier for you if you don't have children to provide for. Where frankly, the message should have been, especially in economically challenged areas, like providing for children should be your primary function in life. It should not be, how much money can I get or what can I do? It should be like, how do I make things better for my kids and everybody's kids?
Absolutely. And Jason, this is Wikipedia, so Facebook. This is not Todd Peterson conjecture right now. But part of the motivation was to stop the racial degradation of society. Okay, so in very explicit terms, and if you go to the Wikipedia page on vasectomy, you can find this. You can click on the hyperlink to the term racial degradation. But there were real concerns 100 years ago about what was happening to society with commingling and with certain populations reproducing. I mean, very explicit in terms of why they were starting to go down this route of essentially castrating males.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. And now if you look, it's just and it's gone too from this thing that would happen infrequently. Like when I was young, I was like, I don't want to have kids. And I had actually asked my doctor, like, can I get a vasectomy? And he's like, no, we don't do that till you're like 40 and 50 and have had your run or had some kids. Because, even though it could be reversible, like we just, like, as a medical community, that's just unhealthy for you. And it's interesting because one of one of the guys we work with in our group, Mike, he like, I think he's in his early 30s, and he's like, I'm gonna get the snip, and it's like, guy's got no kids, and his doctor's like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, and
And
credit to my guy, and he was young. We highlighted on that one. On the other side, we'll highlight why I think his youth played a role in kind of my epiphany. I did get asked, what's your status? What's the status with kids? Are you really sure about this? Because, yep, you can get it reversed, but for the most part, the success rate on that is fairly low. So they did their due diligence there. I appreciated that piece. But at the same time, man, I think this is getting pushed way too hard.
oh yeah. Well, we should go to our first break. Hey, folks, here at the Freedom from the Press podcast, we got a couple great sponsors. We've got Split Rock Coffee, which you'll get to meet Paul, their CEO. Go to splitrockcoffee.com, promo code Todd10, get a big discount. And then Mike Lindell and his team at MyPillow. We got a MyPillow code. So not only does Todd have a code, but the American Tribune has a promo code on MyPillow. And I got to say, when you go to MyPillow, get the towels, man. Thank me later. Like, they're phenomenal. Use promo code Tribune and they'll set you up. But and on the flip side of the break, we're going to get into abortion, folks. Tune in.
We'll see you in a bit.
My Towels solved the problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
Hey, happy day, everybody. Thank you for your generous support this year for Split Rock Coffee. I just want to come to you real quick and talk to you about a couple of things. One of it is our Coffee with Purpose program. You know, that part of those profits go back to supporting our disabled veterans, our children, our families, uh, organizations, Fishing for Life, Air Power, those types of things. Not only do you get a great cup of coffee, but I got to tell you, folks, it's a great mission that we're on. And we have light, medium, and dark, and it's in whole bean or ground. Now, here's a couple of samples of our ground product. This is a light and a dark, and there's a medium also. If you go to our website, splitrockcoffee.com, and all of our products are there, and take a few minutes, look around, leave us your comments, please. And today we've got a special. As you check out, you can use your promo code at splitrockcoffee.com, Todd10, TODD 10, folks. Todd 10 today, 10% off, and get on it right away because we're selling fast for fourth quarter. Christmas and the holidays is coming up, folks. Thank you again. SplitRockCoffee.com. Use your promo code Todd 10. Thank you so much.
Giddy up. And I got to say, too, I drink Split Rock coffee, and I use my pillow, especially the towels. I got to say, like, the pillows are good. Slippers, amazing. Towels are my favorite My Pillow product. Todd, you got any My Pillow stuff?
I have the slippers. I've got the towels. I've got the actual pillow. I got it all.
Oh, man. Jen and I got the mattress and the mattress topper, too. I'm just telling
All
you.
right, that's next on my list.
Oh, giddy up. All right, folks. Here we go. This is where social media is going to get a little wonky. It's kind of funny because when we talk about a topic like birth control measures, we can see on the social media platforms how much it gets pushed out. We didn't have an announcement this week of the show because we weren't sure exactly the start time. But you can tell that the algorithm doesn't push it out as far because normally you'll see 1,000 people or 500 people or whatever pop onto view. When you pick a topic like this, like they don't push that. So if they don't go look for it, like people won't find it. So that's why we need you to share. But abortion. Let's start there, Todd.
Jason, I'm going to start with this tweet from Ashley St. Clair. Referenced her earlier this week as it related to some Bootgate, but in this case, a little more serious of a topic there. So it's in comment to a picture of a young child on the left, an older child that has since grown up on the right. And she says, I'll just read from her tweet there. She says, I think about this often with my son. The first thing my doctor asked when my pregnancy was confirmed was, do you want to keep it? And then she goes on to say, anti-natalist culture in the name of equality has permeated academia and the medical community. That kind of ties into what we were saying about vasectomy, the pill, really the devaluation of human life here. But specifically when it comes to confirming a pregnancy, audience, let us know. Have you been asked at some point, do you want to keep it when you confirmed your own pregnancy?
And it's remarkable because you hear stories about this. And I remember back when I was young, abortions were not very common. If you got an abortion, like you were kind of looked on like this is not cool. And I think there was a time, probably in the 80s, 90s, where we all said, a baby is a baby as soon as it's conceived. We all kind of had that moral value that if it's 6 months or 6 weeks old, like you could do an ultrasound, you could see fingers and toes. And then all of a sudden something changed societally. And it started with, it's how the left does everything. They start with, let's get an inch. And their inch was, we want abortions. Who remembers safe, legal, and rare? And that was Bill Clinton's thing. Like, let's just all agree, let's make abortion safe, legal, and rare. So the concept wasn't conservatives go, okay, so we want them safe. Yeah, everybody can agree safe. Legal, okay, we don't want people thrown in jail. But rare, let's all agree on rare. Rare is that, like, let's not encourage it. Let's not push it. Let's still value human life. But then the left started assaulting rare. And Todd, how did they do that?
Well, they made it extremely available to everybody. And you can look at some of the funding of Planned Parenthood and the conversations that young girls and women were surrounded with. And the narrative was really about you do you. And so we saw the culture shift. And then we saw politically, the right had nothing to counter that piece with, because it's really hard to argue against responsibility and taking care of yourself when you can just sell, as the other side did extremely well. Focus on you, and then you can start shifting the conversation around dehumanization as well. And so take away that moral guilt you might be feeling, because we haven't even defined what a baby is yet. And I know you wanted to add some pieces to that as well, Jason, but I think that cultural conversation is certainly a big part of it.
Oh, I think the cultural conversation is kind of the underpinning, because if you look as a society, if you're going to be a parent, Todd talked about it with his daughter. He was up last night 5 times with his kid. At 5 a.m., I got up. We were messaging back and forth. I'm kind of an early morning guy. He's like, oh, I was up all night with the kid, and we made pumpkin lattes, which those look delicious.
His dad needed something.
But Todd, as a parent, felt pride and joy in taking care of his daughter last night. He felt fulfilled. So right now, Todd's sitting there tired but fulfilled. As a society, we've deconstructed that from being a parent, and especially for women, where like your job of taking care of that child, which, I mean, let's be honest, women are usually better than taking care of kids than men, right? They're the loving, nurturing ones. We'll teach them to walk, or stuff like that, but I mean, women are nurturers. And all of a sudden you've got the women. So you put them on the pill, you mess with their hormones, you tell them they don't got to be a mom, it's okay to be selfish, which is against their nature. Women by nature, I don't think, are selfish. And then we wonder why they're depressed. Why are they not feeling like, hey, I need to, like, this should be my overall purpose and my calling, and that sort of thing. And then if you look at the culture, even when we talk about abortion, when you say you're pro-life, what's the left's response? Well, are we going to do paid family leave? Are you going to pay for their daycare? Are you going to pay for this? Are you going to pay for that? And it's like, no, I'm not going to pay for your kids. You should be somebody who looks and said, it is my responsibility to take care of my children. I don't want the government or somebody else to have to take care of my children. But that's where conservatives start losing the fight, is because we're teaching you how great it is to feel that sense of pride and fulfillment, and take care of your kid, whereas the left gets to say, you know what, save your money, have the government take care of it. It's truly demon.
Jason, I can't even imagine inviting the government or someone else into my child's bedroom last night while she was waking up with her night terrors. It doesn't even dawn on me, like, I am the parent. It is my job to do that, and I want to go do that. And so the argument of like, well, what are you going to do once they're born? It's immaterial to the larger point of the conversation. And Jason, it's really astounding that this debate now hinges on the definition of life. We used to take it for granted what life was. But suddenly we're not talking about other things, because the left has us focused now on debating, when does life begin, or what's a baby? And it's not a baby until it's out of the birth canal, or there's no life there. And they have their heads twisted in this pretzel logic, because you can go to any leftist woman that's excited to be a mom, and she'll show you her pregnancy test. And she knows what that means. We know what that means. And she might be 6 weeks along, just did the P test, and she's ecstatic. And then you start chipping away at that. Well, why are you excited? What does that represent? But then when it comes to this conversation around our A word here, they completely forget what they're excited about.
Well, and here's what's crazy too, and here'll be a challenge for folks that have friends on the left, and we talk about it on the show. Like, we've both got Democrats in our lives. I've got some kids that are a little left leaning, or a lot left leaning kids nowadays. But talk to them about, like, when does life begin? And in my opinion, I think life begins at conception. That's when unique DNA is created, and then that's the building blocks of birth. But even if you say at heartbeat or fingers, at some point prior to the baby popping out of the mom, we can say that's a life, and we can debate where that argument is. But here's what's weird, and here's what you got to ask your friends on the left or the kids, like, when does life begin? They'll have no answer to that. They've not processed, they've not thought about it.
Well, they can't accept an actual answer either, Jason. Sorry to cut you off there, but once they identify something, the rest of their pro-choice position kind of falls apart, because then they've now boxed themselves into something that we're happy to debate here and finds at least some common ground to move forward.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because when we talk about abortion, The other thing that they've done really well on the left is they've made it about my body, my choice. Raise your hand if you've heard my body, my choice. You've seen some lesbian that nobody would ever want to have a baby with and a pussy hat with a shirt saying how many abortions they had. And they're like, oh, my body, my choice. And as a conservative, fact check, we agree. We agree less government involvement in your life is good. That's why I want lower taxes. That's why I want more freedoms. That's why I don't want government encroaching on me. And by only having their people ask the question about, is it my body, my choice, or is the government going to tell me what to do? You completely disconnect the argument from when is the baby's life there? Because as soon as you agree that that baby has life, you have a responsibility as a person to take care of that life. And then it's also, and that's where conservatives, we need to get the left to understand, when is life created? Like, just answer that one question. The rest of it we can flush out. Because at whatever point you feel that that life was created, that's when it's not just your body, your choice. It's the baby's body and the baby's choice, because that's what we're worried about. So for me, I say life begins at conception. So that's when I think the baby's body, the baby's choice becomes relevant. Maybe you're 6 weeks or maybe you're 3 months, but that's the number we have to get to as a society. But they polarize this argument so that you can't even have that conversation. Because once we can agree that life is created at this point, then we can say, okay, that's the point where we should protect this child's life just as much as yours.
Absolutely. And Jason, just to hammer that point home, the my body, my choice argument works when we're talking about the woman, but they completely ignore the body and the life and the rights of that baby. I'm going to lose a couple audience members here, but look, we're honest here. We're not going to hide anything. From a political standpoint, Jason, this is not really where we meant to take the conversation today, but let's just have this conversation too. Politically speaking, I fear that the Republican Party is going to lose a lot of would-be voters strictly because of the abortion thing. And we saw this play out in the midterms, where a lot of candidates in kind of those toss-up districts likely lost out because of the noise around Roe v. Wade getting overturned. You had Lindsey Graham, who philosophically I agreed with his position, but I don't want the government stepping in, and I don't want him doing it in October, when he came out and said we should have a 15-week federal ban on abortion. How many voters did he turn off by doing that? This is not going to be an argument that's won overnight in the minds of people or at a political level here. And I think we just need to agree on a number. I'm happy to say 6 or 12 for allowing abortion, just so we can move on and focus on other policies, and then not make that the sole focus of elections. Because if we're just going to debate life begins at conception, that's the hard line, 0 abortions, you're never going to win politically. And then what good is your position if you're never in power to actually implement that change? So you can go to bed feeling good about yourself at night, like, I have a hard and fast 0 abortions. That's great, but you're not going to enact any meaningful change at a state or federal level here. So, like I said, I see some comments come in. That's personally where I stand. I'm not going to hide behind that. But we got to figure out how the GOP or any political party can move forward and actually do some change to protect the most babies. Because right now, 0 babies are protected as we allow this to continue.
Well, and I think I share a big part of review, and I think this is where Republicans lose. Okay, so let's give an example here of comments. Steve Carey, 100% agree with you. 100%. Better to lose votes than forsake God. Jeff jumps in here. Hey, Jeff, thanks for listening. As soon as cells begin dividing, life has begun. Completely true. Robert, well, how they did is because it's evil. Left is pure evil. That's simple. 100% true story. The average Democrat person, what we have to understand as conservatives is that people on the left and young people are taught that 3-month baby in the womb with fingers and toes and heartbeats and eyeballs and all that stuff, they're taught that that's not a baby. And if you go talk to if you got a 16-year-old kid, talk to us, leave us a comment, send us a note. Say, if you're 6 months pregnant, is that a person? Is that a baby? Well, no, it's a zygote. It's a fetus. It's a whatever. And that's where conservatives, we lose this battle, is on messaging. When somebody says my body, my choice, my answer to them is just tell me when life begins. Just let's define the number. Because at that point, they have rights. And it's funny because the left will come back and say, what, are you going to make sure that people have to pay child support? Yep. My opinion, if you're a dad, you knock up a woman and you bail, both financially and being involved. If you're not going to make time to go to the doctor's appointments, be involved in that kid's life, I think you should be thrown in jail until the kid's 18. That's just my opinion. Pretty radical, but I think that you can't just put it all on the woman. You know what I mean? I think, hey, dad, you were there. You helped make the baby too. You should share in those responsibilities. And that's why it's funny when the left comes back with that, or they'll say things like, oh, so is the baby covered on this program? Sure, I'm good. Cover them on insurance. Like, that's great. You're like, give them rights. Give them a social security number when they're 6 months along. Like, I don't really care. Like, I think they're a person. But that's why, and Todd touched on it very well with in the midterms, Lindsey Graham comes out and says, oh, no abortions after X number of weeks, and everybody loses their mind. And I think if Republicans got better at messaging and said, you on the left, you just tell us when life begins and how you decided that, and that's where we'll agree on abortion. They have no logical argument to land anywhere other than at some point between 0 months and 9 months. The other thing that I'll say is, personally, I think it should be a state's issue, which that's the other ironic thing. It shouldn't be a federal issue. And if you live in a state that has one set of rules, and you disagree with that, then you should move to a state that has different sets of rules. But that's a whole different ball game. Todd, what else we got on abortion? Hey, some great comments, folks. Thanks.
I was just checking those out too. Yeah, Steve, thanks for joining us here. And to your point about better lose their votes than to forsake God. Yeah, speaking individually here, I'm with you on that, man. I'm going to vote Republican. Like, my life depends on it right now. We have gone into what the uniparty means and how when you vote Republican, sometimes you're kind of voting for the swamp and not necessarily someone different there. But if that's their position, that's my position as well. I'm with you. Life begins when that cell is created and divides for the first time. Sucking their thumb at 15 weeks, I would bump life beginning a lot sooner than that. But that's just one example of how these babies at such a young age are functioning and they're autonomous. So that does not.
I think to put a bow on the abortion topic, I think my advice, because people always ask us, what can I do? And guys like Todd and I, like, we do websites, we create conservative content. We start doing a podcast that maybe nobody watches or maybe nobody listens to, but hopefully we can touch 100, 1,000, 10,000 people, and they go, it's a pretty good discussion, and they bring up some interesting points. I think the important thing for us as a society, if you ever wanted to see a politician actually solve the problem, it would be, let's just define where life begins. Let's start there, because at that point, then let's talk about the rights that child has. And then it takes away the argument of my body, my choice, and it shifts the argument to when does the baby have a body and a choice. And so that's my advice to you as our audience, is don't make it like, just ask the question, just define when life begins and how you arrived at that concept. And you'll be amazed, because most of your friends on the left will look at you and go, ugh, and they just won't have an answer.
Yeah. And Jason, legality is not morality. And so I grew up in a generation defined by Roe v. Wade. It was always present. None of my friends in my orbit ever even entertained the idea of an abortion. We can this law can exist, and we can still raise young people to have the right values too. And in essence, make that law meaningless. If we have enough young people committed to the idea of that life is valuable, life is created by God, and we have a duty to protect that life, this eventually could go away as well. So there's the political war, there's the culture war to fight too at home.
Oh yeah. Now we got to get to the last topic, Todd.
Do.
And there's only one way to kick off this topic.
I think that's the tinfoil hat. Here we come.
Dun 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 dun.
We have music too. Here, we're live.
Giddy up. All right.
We won't be too silly here.
All right. This is going to blow your mind away. So we're talking about birth control, how the pill messes with girls, lack of purpose. Vasectomy started out as like crowd control for the deplorables, and now it's just normal. We talk about abortion and how it devalues human life. I don the tinfoil hat because we're going to talk about this, and I guarantee if you go to your normie friends who don't watch programs like this, they do not know this is happening, and they're going to call you a crazy tinfoil hat wearing idiot. Did you know that in the country of Canada, that they actually have a program that talks about how to kill able-bodied people? The government is killing people. Todd?
Medically assisted suicide. So here we go. This is the MAID program in Canada. We're just going to pop up some stats here. This will blow your mind. Facebook fact checkers, I'm going to say that I believe this program started in 2016. I'm not 100% certain on that. You can check out the Substack, AmericanTribune.news. You can read a little bit more about this here. In a 5-year window, if I am correct on my numbers here, 30,000 people received assisted dying in the country of Canada. That's 6,000 people per year. And what's incredible is that accounts for over 3% of all deaths in Canada. Over 3% of deaths in Canada were at the hands of their government because they legalized your right to kill yourself. And if you want to look at some of the qualifying factors, Jason, if you're feeling upset, there's been some news reports of people that are homeless or just in financial straits. If you have chronic pain, again, we talked about that umbrella term mental health before. Well, what does that exactly mean outside of the subjective? What does chronic pain mean outside of the subjective? You can go to your doctor and just say, life's not going well right now, and they will prescribe death to you.
Yeah, so it's interesting as we're kind of going down this deep dive. And what was the name of the program, Todd? It's called MAID?
MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying.
Yeah, so in approximately 2016 for Facebook fact checkers, it started, and it kind of goes back to a longer conversation in America. Like there was the point where Dr. Jack Kevorkian, for those who remember him, he wanted medically assisted suicide. And that was kind of a hot topic probably 20, 30 years ago. And they were talking about old people near end of life, and they were going to expand that. And at the time, I was saying like, I just don't want the government into this system, like saying like, how can we help you kill yourself? Just seems like a bad idea. Now, on the flip side, like I've gone through with family members or friends who've gotten old, who had really debilitating medical conditions, and they started looking, and I mean, frankly, I had that conversation. My father-in-law, who just passed away, you know, prayers to the monster, like his quality of life was not that great the last few months of his life. And my wife and I talked about that. Like it just breaks your heart. And wouldn't you see euthanasia? But folks, this is why you don't open cans of worms like this, because the can of worm got opened in Canada, and they said, let's take these people in these really horrible situations and let's start a government program where they can kill themselves. And it was chronic pain or, you know, debilitating medical conditions or those sorts of things. And now that program has continued to grow and expand. If you're depressed, if you are feeling hopeless, there was a few cases that were documented where people were homeless and just had no future, the government, paid for by your insurance, will take you through a medical procedure that will let you end your life. And it was funny because when Todd was doing the stats, we were looking at the numbers, and it's like 30,000 people that the government of Canada has assisted ending their life. And pull that slide back up, Todd, because the last year, and they're still just projecting out some of these numbers, but if you look at the bottom, in 2021, it was 10,000 patients. So this continues ramping up. I've heard, unconfirmed, so take it with a grain of salt, it's as high as 30 or 40,000 people this year that the government has assisted in killing themselves in the state of Canada. This is why it's horrible. This is why we don't go down some of those paths, folks. And that's where when you give the government, like many of these things start with good intentions, but then as it continues to grow and evolve, it just turns into something just god awful.
And Jason, you brought up Jack Kevorkian. Do you remember what happened to him in the late 90s?
What happened to him, Todd?
He got sent to prison on murder charges. So
Right.
you had referenced the Clinton era, safe, legal, and rare for abortion. You mentioned Jack Kevorkian, who got sent to prison for murder for doing assisted suicide. And in the span of 25 years, the theme of the show today was the devaluation of human life. Do we need to spell this out for our audience, Jason? How far we have come in terms of where abortion readiness is, or the availability of abortion, and now euthanasia programs. Don't think it's going to stop just in Canada, but how far have we fallen as a society that in just 25 years, my adulthood basically, that we're even having conversations about this. I cannot imagine this podcast existing 25 years ago with these themes on here. The pill was certainly in a different place. They had not begun the massive marketing towards lifestyle. Vasectomies were happening, but certainly not at the same level. My friends and I all casually talk about it. I'm here on the podcast openly talking about it. I don't think that would have been the case 25 years ago. And certainly the last two bullet points on our agenda today, we are in a radically different place.
Well, and it's kind of one of the themes that you're going to hear us talk about on the podcast. If you look, if I would have gone back 25 years, I'm somebody in my early 20s. We got Bill Clinton as president. He's up there saying safe, legal, and rare. And if I would have went up to 25-year-old Jason and go, hey, Jason, in 25 years, there are going to be people wearing T-shirts on the street being celebrated on social media for how many babies they killed via abortion. They're going to be wearing pussy hats, and they're going to have abortion day parties like they have birthday parties. And not only will they not be condemned as some social outcast that like, oh my God, this is awful. They would be celebrated like, oh, look at how brave you are. That's been in 25 years, folks. Jack Kevorkian, 25 years ago, dude was thrown in prison for helping really chronically ill people kill themselves. Now, the government of Canada has killed 30,000 people because they were sad and they had some pain. Think of what this podcast looked like. We're sitting here in 2023. Think about 2050. If we don't not just stop this trend, if we don't reverse and start bringing morality back to our country and to our life, if we don't all start finding God, the freedom from the press in 2050, that's going to be a really scary show, folks. I'm
afraid to think of the conversations we're going to have in 25 years if this train does not get back on the tracks. And Jason, I would just point out too, we don't have the stats to pop up in front. So this again is all kind of like, this is me hypothesizing, but I don't think it's an accident that you look at the mental health of women in general today and men. Mental health in general has declined precipitously. And again, you can put probably two charts side by side where people are at spiritually and some of the things available to them in our society. I don't think that's an accident. And, look out Facebook, and I don't have my tinfoil hat, but I don't think that's, the unintended consequence. I think there might be an intentional correlation with that.
As we've replaced God with pharmaceuticals, is anybody surprised that we're seeing a degradation in society? It's remarkable. Well, hey, folks. We're getting to the end of the show for the week. Tons going on in the news, by the way. Follow our primary news site, theamericantribune.com. Got lots of news on there about what's going on in the House. Speaker Mike Johnson doing a great job. Lot of stuff going on culturally. The only team without Pride Night in baseball won the World Series championship. Like, who knew? Way to go, Texas Rangers. Maybe God had something involved in that. As we line up for next week, President Trump has tons of court cases. They're trying to take him off the ballot in Colorado. Todd dropped some great videos. Check out Todd's Twitter feed for that. But yeah, there's a ton going on in the news, and we appreciate you guys being on the journey with us. And like I mentioned before, make sure you give us a like, comment, and most importantly, a share. And I encourage you to share the show with people that might have different political views. Because let's just say abortion. Let's just say everybody who watches this show, I have a couple thousand people watch this show. Everybody got one person to change their mind and say, you know what? It's not my body, my choice. I need to define when life begins. Let's let that be the point of the argument. Think of what kind of snowball effect that could have in the world we have today. So thanks for tuning in. I'll turn it over to Todd to close us out.
Yeah, nothing to add, Jason. You nailed it. This was a fun episode for us to do, really heavy, but some really interesting stats and data points, and really just for us to take a step back and look at where our culture is at today. Definitely leaves you thinking on some issues there. So like Jason said, share this with people. That's how you support our program. Hope you enjoyed today, and thanks for following along. We'll see you next week.